Welcome to another episode of Diamond Kings, the YouTube baseball talk show brought to you by our blog at Reading Between the Seams, part of the Sports Kings Media Network. September is in full swing as teams are already clinching playoff berths. A few races are going to go down to the wire. We're going to talk about that. We're almost to the postseason, folks. It's that best time of year. My name is David Whitlock from Houston, Texas, although I do have loyalties to the Baltimore Orioles. I was born in the state of Maryland. My first game I attended was 1979. I'm not sure, at least one of us was not alive that year, but it was actually watching Eddie Murray play at old Baltimore Memorial Stadium. And I still jump on the bandwagon every 17 years or so when they win the division. But joining me is an all-star panel that's been with us all year. These guys are great. They got some good opinions, so we'll get into them. Starting with Lorenzo Mejia from Marietta, California. How are you today, Lorenzo?
Doing great. It's a great night out here in Southern California. Magic number's down to 2 for my Angels, so it's a great night.
Angels look in good position to secure that postseason spot. Probably have a lot of home field advantage in the playoffs as well. We'll go over to Florence, South Carolina, and Michael Prosser. How are you today, sir?
I'm just thankful my Braves are back at 500.
Oh, jeez.
And it causes me to drink a little bit.
It's been a tough road for the Braves. That series up in playing against Texas was a little bit more tough than they thought they would get.
That was a joke.
We missed you the last couple of weeks, Michael. And
it's good to be back. It is good to be back.
The guy that's flexing is our man from Dallas, Texas. He's also a fellow Texas Longhorn fan like myself. How are you doing today, Leroy McConnell III?
Heck, I gotta shake those doggone Braves fans for making my Rangers win. We're trying to get the number 1 draft pick for 2015. But yeah, we're saying we got a 3-game lead going into the night, so come on, Rangers, don't blow this.
So it's still good. The Astros are going to finally have to give up their 3-year reign on the number 1 overall draft pick. Of course, they didn't even sign one of those 3, but they do have the number 2 next year because of that. But we're not talking draft today. We're going to talk some of the best baseball news and some of the pennant races. And let's start with the Orioles because last time we met was just before Chris Davis was suspended. And it was for amphetamines, which is a little bit different than the steroid suspension in terms of how it works. And it was definitely his second offense. He'd been tested many times. He'd had an exemption in years past, but they either didn't grant it to him or he didn't ask. I think I heard they didn't grant it to him after these years, and he tested positive. So he did the crime. Now he's got to do the time. Let's start with Michael. What do you think? I mean, obviously that's postseason implications. Was this a dumb move? Should the Major League reconsider this rule? What are your thoughts on this whole situation?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, the guy's got like what, ADHD or some known disorder of some sorts that's making him take this medication, or so I've heard. I mean, you never know what you read on the internet these days.
So that could be diagnosed by a doctor. I mean, ADHD.
Yeah, I mean,
for
for some odd reason, I don't know why the exemption wasn't granted this year. I didn't really dive into that, but at some point in time, I kind of just think that this is just a bad thing happening to a good person. I mean, let's look at what happened prior to this. He and J.J. Hardy help a 41-year-old diehard Orioles fan who's on his deathbed, well, his terminal bed. The guy's got terminal cancer. Made his dream come true. He got to meet his 2 favorite players. That was cool. Then the suspension hits. Everybody's like, oh, Chris Davis is a bad guy. Well, what does he do? He just gives a big middle finger to Major League Baseball's Bud Selig and helps a poor, helpless man who sadly has destroyed his vehicle in a car accident, yanks him out of the car, saves the guy's life. He's not a bad guy. It's just bad things happen to good people. It was one of those. It's kind of like Wes Welker. Wes Welker's not a bad guy. Is he? No. That stuff's legal in Denver. It's totally fine over there. Baltimore's a different story. But it's I don't know. I don't think the Davis thing is it's not going to have too big of a ramification. Yeah, there's going to be ramifications because of Crush Davis. However, Crush Davis has looked like crap Davis this year. In a contract year, he's looked like absolute, nothing. And if he walks great. That's fine. Nelson Cruz is still in Baltimore, folks. Let's not forget that. It's Nelson Cruz's team, not Chris Davis's anymore.
Yeah, and you look at the fact, I mean, they've already lost Matt Wieters, they've already lost Manny Machado, they're already short-handed now to lose another bat, but here they are, one of the first teams to clinch, so they certainly...
And with a 12-game lead in the East, I mean, wow.
Yeah, no, they never miss a beat, and that's a credit to Buck Showalter. I want to throw it to Leroy now, because he and I had some offline dialogue on how Chris Davis was calling out some PED users, and now suddenly he's finding himself in the bullseye. What are your thoughts on the situation?
Well, I laugh at Chris Davis. Some fact one, I sure wanted him to do well when he was in Texas. They gave him every opportunity to do it, and he couldn't do it for whatever reason. And I was glad to see him get an opportunity down there in Baltimore. Buck Showalter, who formerly coached down here in Texas, he knew about him through the minor system, so he went to Baltimore, got some success where he had 33 home runs the year before he hit the 53. And everything looked good for Chris Davis. I can remember just last year when he was at 37 home runs right at the All-Star break, and how he had ran his mouth and said Roger Maris's home run record. That's what he viewed as being the home run record instead of Barry Bonds. And it just seems like he'd be damned if Barry Bonds' record is the all-time. But now, look at him. He is up there getting a taste of his own medicine now. And for the simple fact that he went ahead and ran his mouth, he was no different than a Rafael Palmeiro, trying to be holier than thou. And then here he gets caught. And the thing is, now it explains why he's having a terrible season. 26 home runs is not bad but we expected more from him. Yes, this is the second time this year he's been caught, and that's why his numbers have been probably as down as they have. And right now, even though it's just Adderall, but hey, you know what? You got to do your job. You're getting paid money. You got to know what baseball has to know what is going in your body. You failed, so you pay the consequences. You are no different than anybody else.
Yeah, it certainly, I mean, amphetamines, Adderall, all those things, I mean, it helps you focus, the game slows down, you see things more clearly, whether it's a treatable, if he has ADHD, it's like, it's one of those things, well, you should be able to take it, but it can give you an advantage. I mean, there's been many guys that have used it without any previous history because it gives them that focus that they can't get otherwise. And so, it's definitely a performance enhancer. There's no question in my mind that his performance was enhanced by that. It was interesting you mentioned his home run total by the All-Star break last year, but that's almost like the leading home run total this year. There's not many guys over 40 home runs.
Stanton's only one with 37 right now.
Yeah, and so you look at that and you're like, wow, it was giving him something, obviously, because he was even willing to risk known disaster to take it. But Lorenzo's been patient. What are your thoughts on EVs in general, this particular case, Chris Davis, the implications on the postseason, etc.?
If he's dumb enough to take amphetamines, more than likely he was probably taking HGH as well. And if you look at him, he's a typical prospect. He couldn't do anything in Texas. He never really did much over there, so he gets another chance in Baltimore. All in Baltimore, he cracks over 50 home runs last season. And they were saying, oh, yes, he's a big guy. He's always fun for power. But, yes, he was – my guess that he's on HGH or something. And I don't know if it's just the water in Baltimore or something, but look at the Baltimore history of guys that have been HGH users. Oh. We can go back to Brady Anderson. We can go back to Miguel Tejada. Let's talk about Rafael Palmeiro. Talk about all these guys in Baltimore. And you just think to yourself, there has to be some type of link. What's that, Leroy?
Nelson Cruz.
You got Nelson Cruz and Chris Davis were Texas teammates.
Oh, yeah, same hookups.
Yeah, but if you want to wear your Baltimore Orioles hat with pride, that's okay. It's just, it's something I wouldn't do.
I should put a black X over it, maybe. Or something. I'm going back to the Eddie Murray, the Brooks Robinson day. Well, maybe not Brooks Robinson. I'm not that old, but
wow.
But anyway, I do remember when Jim Homer pitched. Very good analysis. Hey, I've already said most of my thoughts. I think he's definitely. I think the current Orioles that might be using Nelson Cruz or Chris Davis are definitely disconnected from the Mitchell report that had the other guys. But at the same time, they're just as guilty. Well, I mean, Nelson Cruz hasn't been guilty yet. but there he is leading the league in home runs after being suspended. What was it, last year? So
50 games. 50.
Yeah. We got to watch. As far as the postseason implications, they seem to not miss a beat. It's next man up. There's not a dominant team in the American League. Maybe the Angels, I'll give them that, but they're certainly as good as any other team. We'll see if they can do it. So speaking of the postseason, let's talk a little bit. So I believe there's been 3 teams that have clinched the playoffs so far. That being the Washington Nationals, the Baltimore Orioles, and the Los Angeles Angels. The Angels fully clinched the playoff berth, not quite the AL West yet. Next team's up. There really isn't a good next team up after the Angels clinch because the wild cards are closed, the AL Central's closed, the National League Central and National League West are closed. So what are your thoughts on the postseason prospects? My fantasy team noticed that the Nationals rested all their starters today. The Orioles are going to get healthy. And the Angels, they'll clinch very shortly. But what are your thoughts on those 3 teams' postseason prospects? And also give me some thoughts on who's going to scoop up the rest of the postseason berths. And since I've said the Angels about 5 times, we'll start with a guy on the West Coast, Lorenzo. What do you think about the teams that have made it so far? Are they the favorites, or are there other teams that are favorites?
In the American League, I don't want to jinx myself, but the Angels are the favorites. I got my tickets to the divisional series this morning with my Angel Insider password. So I got my tickets for Game 2. I will be there on Friday night for Game 2. It's exciting to see the Angels. One thing that I was really focusing on was I went on StubHub after I bought my tickets just to see how much they were going for. The prices for tickets on StubHub is just crazy. I couldn't believe they were going for so much amount of money, and it was very impressive. Now, as far as the Orioles go, Orioles and Nationals, people are talking about a Beltway series. I don't see that happening. I don't see Washington being able to do well in the playoffs. And also with the Angels, like I've said before, I still don't trust their ace. You need an ace in the postseason, and if Weaver's your ace, I don't think they're going to go very far.
That's certainly good. And we talked a little bit of a Beltway series last year, or Freeway series in LA last week. We talked about, and the odds are, even if you have 8 teams making it on each side, it's a 1 in 64 chance kind of that either of those teams will make it. So probably not. But Michael Prosser covers some DC sports for our DC Sports Kings branch. What are your thoughts? Do you think it'll be a Beltway series out east? What do you think about those 2 teams? And I would like a thought on the Braves. Are they dead in the water? Can they make a final run here?
No, they can't. This team was doomed from the start when you lose 2 of your, top 5 pitching, your 2 of your top 5 rotation guys to Tommy John surgery. Yeah, you bring in an Irvin Santana, who has done well. Everybody knew that was going to happen. But the shoddy rookie performance by Alex Wood, although he's 11-10. Aaron Harang been nothing short of a joke.
He was good for like a month, but
he was good for 2 games. Serious choke artist. And I thought it was just San Diego. No, apparently not. There will be no Beltway series, despite the fact that Washington has run away with everybody in the regular season, including taking I think it was 3 or 4 from the Dodgers in a series. Steven Strasburg has been next to he's been human this year. Everybody, expected Strasburg to be Kershaw, and Kershaw has out Strasburg. I mean, Strasburg has been, awful. Doug Fister is probably the ace of that squad right now. Not Steven Strasburg, not Gio Gonzalez, Doug Fister. Doug Fister has been consistent all year. I think he's, 15-7 maybe, give or take, plus-minus differential on those win-losses. Fantastic trade. But it's an even year. I'm superstitious enough as it is. You can't discount the Giants in this because just for the whole superstitious thing, despite the fact that the Jake Peavy trade has been awful, horrible. Out west, it's LA's race to lose. Oakland has pretty much laughed themselves into oblivion right now. That Cespedes trade is probably about as bad of a trade since John Smoltz being traded for what's that guy's name?
Doyle Alexander.
Alexander. Doyle, yeah.
Nice.
That's just so bad. So bad. Yes, I dropped it.
Before
Alex.
your time.
It was actually, let's see, that was, let's see,
89. wasn't it?
87.
July of 89 that trade went down,
87.
and I was
87?
born.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so 2.5 years later. So yeah, way before my time. God, don't it? I love making you guys feel old. So here we go.
Hey, we
Out
lived
with
it,
the
though.
old,
You missed out on a lot of fun, man.
out with the new. The Pirates are also dead in the water. Done.
But the Pirates are still in wild card contention at least.
No, I don't see it. I really don't. I got a feeling, something's gonna happen. They're gonna
Man, the
slip.
Pirates they got a spot right now.
Yeah,
They
right
got a
now.
spot.
Right
They only
now,
10
the
games
Oil-
left.
The Royals had a spot last week.
Hey, man, we got a spot now, too.
Maybe.
No. And we're kicking Chris Sale butt tonight by 1.
Yeah,
And
but
we're
it's
game
Chris
ahead of
Sale.
Seattle.
It's Chris Sale. That Chicago
Hey,
White Sox team has been
You're
dead
just
for
mad
4
because your
months.
ass is your Braves got your ass whipped by Rangers last week. Not my fault.
I'm mad because we're 500. The fact that we beat a depleted national squad tonight is nothing short of a God-given miracle.
Stop hating.
All right, I'm gonna cut you guys off. First of all, I'm gonna take offense to the Peavy statement because he is now 6-4 with a 2.16 ERA there in San Francisco, and I believe his stats are even better than Lester's, and certainly better than Blackie for the Cardinals. Peavy's been good. I agree with you that the Giants are going to be right there. That division, that race is wide open. Just check over to Leroy. What are your thoughts on the teams that have clinched so far? Our Astros and Rangers, I got to break it to you, man. They're not going to make it this year. Hey, 2015 we'll be back, but certainly your Royals are in the mix. Do you think the Royals are going to make the playoffs? And who do you think are kind of the favorites on either side of the league border there?
I think this, like I said, Selig did a good job with his playoff system, or having the wild card system. I mean, you have three teams, Oakland and Kansas City and Seattle, fighting for those last spots. And teams like Anaheim, or LA Angels, they are not going to just lay down. They are going to make Seattle fight for it. So, and that makes it exciting. As far as the Baltimore and Washington, and I watched them celebrate, and rightly so. But, will the Giants celebrate if they clinch? No. There's more business to do. I think they're satisfied just winning the division. Now, Baltimore, that's a hard division to win. Winning the American League East, you always got to deal with Boston, you got to deal with New York, and they came on top this year. Hooray for them. But you got to look beyond. I mean, that was just one part of the puzzle. This is the playoffs now. The American League, I have concerns about pitching. You got teams like the Angels, you got teams like Baltimore. They score a lot of runs, and that's the strength. But the problem is, if a team like Kansas City, do not sleep on the Royals. The Royals have an ace. They have an ace where the Anaheim Angels, they don't have an ace. Matter of fact, the pitching staff across the board, to me, I think the Royals have the edge. So I think they're dangerous. I still think Oakland can be dangerous for a short series. Detroit, dangerous. Now, I mean, you won't have to score some runs to beat these teams. And, Anaheim, or the Angels and Baltimore, they have the power to do it. But we also know that in the playoffs, pitching is what advances, and pitching is what wins World Series. In the National League, you have the West. What the hell is going on with the Dodgers right now? They're losing 16-2 to Colorado. They've lost. Didn't they lose yesterday? You can't afford that. The Giants are sitting there licking their chops. You want to give the wrong team. The Giants, they're defending champions. They know how to win this time of year. The last team they need to run the show is the Giants.
I believe, like yesterday, there was a scene, or the day before, where Matt Kemp and Yasiel Puig were getting into it. Puig got by a hit. Henley Ramirez was sat yesterday with another sore joint of some sort. So the Dodgers I mean, they got the rotation. I mean, Hyunjin Ryu was also scratched from the start. They still got a good rotation, but it seems like they just can't get it together.
And the only one you can rely on is Kershaw. I mean, are you really scared of Zach Greinke? Are you scared of Dan Herron? I'm not scared of him.
I'm not scared.
You got to pitch 3 games in all the 7 series in order for the Dodgers to be successful.
I'm alarmed that Hyunjin Ryu is not healthy, because when he is healthy, he can be a top-end rotation guy. But right now, he had a miserable start. He gets hurt from time every couple months. Something comes down, but we'll see. Now, good and out. The one other team I'll throw out there is the scary from a former Houston Astros, used to be the NL Central. Gosh darn it, the St. Louis Cardinals always seem to get hot at the right time of year. They always seem to gel. They're going to be a team to contend with. You can look at their record, not be impressed. They lose these games. Trevor Rosenthal is either going to set the record for most saves by a Cardinal or not even be their closer because he's been so bad at times. But come together, if Michael Wacha, like he did last year, could pull it together, that they've got some talented guys who obviously have postseason experience. So if you look at the Nationals, the Dodgers, the Giants, it's the hottest team at the end of the year. We see so many times that we talk about these teams with 98, 100, 102 wins. Then you end up in the playoffs with some team with 88 wins is the hottest team. And you're like, dang, how did that happen? How did they get to the World Series? Well, they were hot at the right time of year. So we'll transition from hot to cold. Let's talk about the bottom of the standings. There's been 2 managerial changes so far this year, and that's affected Leroy's team and my team, the Houston Astros, separated from Bo Porter. Unfortunately, in the Rangers situation, Ron Washington stepped down himself with some sort of personal issue that could be related to either sexual harassment or a relapse in a drug thing. But we're not talking about that. Let's talk about what other managers. Pick one manager each. I just want one. Don't give me 3 or 4. Give me one manager that if you were the general manager right now, today, you would give that guy his walking papers. He's done nothing. He's got no future. And Lorenzo, we'll go with you first.
Ned Yost. Ned Yost has to go based on his talent alone in Milwaukee.
Whoa!
Leroy's about to have a heart attack.
Just dropped a bombshell in here.
85. This is the last time we sniffed any playoffs. And you're saying Yost?
Go ahead.
Explain yourself.
If you look at the analytics and the stats, he's the worst record in all of baseball. I don't think he understands the righty-lefty pitching combinations. I don't know if he understands how that works exactly. So he's the one that has to go. They have the talent there. Like Leroy was saying earlier, their staff is on point. And, so that's what has to happen.
Are you a sabermetrics guy? I mean, is he not following that enough for you, or?
He doesn't. He goes by the gut too much, and I'm not a fan of that. Luckily, we're in the age where we have lots of stats and everything at our disposal, and he still prefers to go with the old, you know what, I feel it in my left knee's feeling good, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that pitcher in. It doesn't make sense to go that route.
Hey, no, fair enough. If you look, I mean, they've had an appreciable collapse over the second half. They don't seem to be able to put it together. They're not performing. I will say that their lineup is underwhelming if you look up and down it, and of course they fired their hitting coach and brought in Dale Spain, and they've done a little bit better. So I'll give them. They've done more with less. They can make the postseason with that pitching. We might. They could win the World Series this year, and we'll go back and look at this episode and make fun of Lorenzo. But not bad analysis at all. Certainly an interesting thought. Michael, what are your thoughts? And is Freddie Gonzalez on the hot seat at all?
God, I hope so. Him and Frank are in both. But aside from that, I'm going to piss off a lot of people in the Twin Cities, and I really don't care. Ron Gardenhire, it's time for you to go. It's just you've been there for 12 years now, and not a whole lot's happened. It's not that you're not a good guy. I love Ron Gardenhire. He's still one of the, the fiery managers. He's a guy, who gets out there and fights for his team. I love that. But you've gone stag, man. There's just no up. There's kind of like malign. You got to be up somewhere. I mean, granted, Minnesota doesn't really have a lot to look forward to. They just got, Target Field. Yeah, it's all nice and cool. They missed the Superdome and all this other stuff. But no, Gardenhire goes.
That makes sense. He's been there a long time. He might be like the longest tenured manager in Major League Baseball. Somebody could look that up. But been there a long time.
Probably so.
The team doesn't.
Well, Socha too.
Socha, yeah. Socha, I mean, Socha was on hot seat last year, and now it could be Manager of the Year candidate if it wasn't for guys like Showalter in the mix. But interesting thought. The Twins probably need to move on in a lot of different directions. But
the team needs to be imploded.
Leroy, I'm interested in your thoughts on managers. Who do you think is the guy that's really overstayed his welcome?
I hope Ned Yost don't get the American League Manager of the Year. Because he couldn't get it. I mean, you have teams like Robin Ventura.
Yeah, been lousy for a couple of years.
I know he's a fan favorite, and he probably comes cheap, but he has no skin on the wall as far as being a coach. Team's lousy. You're talking about X's and O's, and he's probably the one that doesn't know X's and O's. That team has been terrible since Ozzie Guillen's been gone. They're about as bad as the Cubs. Thank God football season started. That would be my choice. As far as Ned Yost, how dare you?
I pity the fool. But no. Yeah. No, I'll throw another name out there, and his name has been in the media lately. But I mean, and Kirk Gibson seems to have completely lost that team. His style is wow. Leroy's so angry he left.
Rage quit.
He's like, I'm out of here. But Kirk Gibson's his style, his approach to handling the Diamondbacks is worn thin. I mean, they've had injuries. They traded away a lot of talent. They traded Justin Upton for better or for worse to the Braves, but he doesn't seem like
about the only good thing that's happened to us.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll throw Kirk Gibson out there as a guy that, a great guy. That moment in '88 was amazing. But I think for my franchise, if I was the Arizona Diamondbacks and they're changing general managers, they got La Russa involved and Dave Stewart might be brought in, but I'd probably just go a different direction there and just let him kind of move on. There might be another team that likes that style. Maybe it's the Houston Astros. I don't know. Maybe we need a little bit of Kirk Gibson in us. But,
well, see now, if I were Houston's brass, if Gardenhire does get his walking papers, bring in a guy like Ron Gardenhire, because. Like I said the last time I was on the show, Houston needs a veteran presence in that clubhouse because there's really not. There was a young team, a young manager. It doesn't bode well. And to branch off of Lorenzo's Ned Yost ordeal, Ned Yost joined all that from Bobby Cox back in the '90s. Man, that's just I love seeing that. I know the whole go with your gut thing is kind of dying out, but with Ned Yost still in the league, it still feels like a piece of Bobby Cox is still in the league. Man, it's
right. It's
always nice.
Sentimental vote there.
Yeah.
All right, well, Leroy or not, we'll move on to our last segment, and when possible or when we can think of a good subject, we talk a non-baseball subject to wrap things up. And of course, we're decent NFL fans. We're following the game, and we're a couple games into the season now. So I'd like to hear from each of you. There's some 0-2 teams. I'll run through them all for you, for better or for worse. But the New York Giants are 0-2, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, New Orleans Saints. Moving down, Indianapolis Colts, Jacksonville Jaguars, Oakland Raiders, and Kansas City Chiefs. Which of these teams do you think? They always say 0-2 teams only got a 10% chance to make the playoffs, but there's always a chance, and I just said about 10 teams. So which of these 0-2 teams do you think are going to make the NFL playoffs? We'll start on the West Coast with Lorenzo.
Okay. Listen to these names and tell me what you think. Ryan Fitzpatrick, Chad Henne, and Jake Locker. Those are the quarterbacks that the Colts still have. They're going to earn their division. Colts are 0-2, yes, but you have Andrew Luck on your side. Andrew Luck's a stud, Stanford alumni. He knows what he's doing out there, so I definitely think the Colts will have the best chance of making the playoffs after their 0-2 start.
No, not bad analysis at all. That game they blew against the Eagles the other night was crushing. Obviously, the first loss was a little bit more expected. They ran into a buzzsaw, but not a bad choice at all. But Michael, your thoughts? Give me an 0-2 team.
Well, that buzzsaw they ran into, they only fell by 7 points, so not terrible. I was juggling between the Colts and the New Orleans Aints. No, they're still going to be the Saints, guys. Don't worry about it. I don't know what the hell is going on with Drew Brees, but he's not getting me my 30-plus points in fantasy football like he's needed to be. And I'm still 2-0. Thank you, Megatron. But no, that team is just way too talented on offense to, be 0-2 like they are. It was a fluke against the Atlanta Falcons. That was just one of those games where you're like, yeah, that could kind of go either way. Atlanta's certainly gotten better, but it's starting to seem like Carolina's the class of that division again. But no, I mean, come on. When you've got a guy like Drew Brees and Marcus Colston, Brandon Cooks, the rookie that they added from Oregon State, is just another weapon. Yeah, they're going to be without Mark Ingram, but it's not like they run the freaking ball anyway. Jerry Bird, yeah, he's coming off his surgery. He'll eventually, if he's not back already, I got to admit I have not watched the Saints because I really don't care. But, that defense has gotten a little bit better. Rob Ryan with that attacking 3-4. It's one of those things. It's a Ryan team, so it's going to be supposed to be sound defensively, but you never can tell with the Saints. But once the offense starts kicking, that's going to be 9-7, 10-6. Aside from Carolina, the division's weak. Atlanta got lucky. New Orleans, they got a shot.
I agree with you both. I can't pick another team. I sat here and just ran through the teams and was like, well, let me contradict these guys. But, I'd say maybe the Giants, but God, they're so lousy, and they're not going to bench Eli Manning, and they were so bad last year. I think both teams make it. I'll just add that. I think both, because of the reasons Lorenzo gave, that the Colts are in a very winnable division. The Texans, hey, they look good at 2-0, but they've been out yardaged so far. They've basically been forcing fortunate turnovers in the red zone to get the ball back, and nobody else in the division is good. And the Saints, I do think they'll make the wild card only, but they're good enough to be the wild card. Of those two teams, I'd say the Colts could make a deep playoff run. I've got some real reservations about the Saints. I think they are over the hill, especially with the Ingram injury this week and Drew Brees not performing. And you got Marcus Colston, who's old, and some of the defensive players that are old.
Yeah, and until that team switches to a 4-3, I don't see it happening. I mean, I get why everybody's switching to the 3-4. I understand it. You're trying to get your fastest guys on the field and everything like that. However, you could seriously run circle. I mean, you're getting guys penetrating 2 gaps at one time. Well, when you don't have the guys that are penetrating 2 gaps at one time, that's huge holes to run through. Those if I'm not mistaken, New Orleans is getting shredded defensively. Like I don't know. Something's got to give, and a switch to the 4-3 would probably be a heck of a lot better for them, and to stop drafting guys in the 3rd round that nobody's ever heard of, like that dude from Canada.
Right. Well, I appreciate it, guys, and a shout-out to Leroy. But he got so angry at the Ned Yost discussion, he just had to check out. He couldn't take it anymore from the Diamond Kings guys. But, no, I appreciate it, Lorenzo and Michael. Great show. Man, this could be a great couple weeks. I mean, we're less than a couple weeks. We're like 10 days away from the end of the season. And by this time next week, we'll be talking probably about some playoff matchups. Hopefully, no more injuries. We could have talked more about. We talked about Giancarlo Stanton last week. We talked about other injuries this week, but I didn't have time.
I'm glad we're not talking about Andrelton Simmons this week. He went out.
Yeah, well, yeah, your team's done anyway. So anyway, thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you guys next week on Diamond Kings. All right, it says it's stopped.